All right, welcome to episode 19 of Ozhead's podcast, and it has been a minute, man. Like 2 months?
It feels like it's been forever.
It has been forever since the last time we did one. But today, we're not only back, but we're back in a big way because we're in a special location. We're at Briarworks in Columbia, Tennessee, which is roughly about an hour from our warehouse.
Right.
And couldn't be more excited to be joined here by our good friend, Pete Prevost.
Yeah.
Is it Prevost or Prevost?
Prevost.
Prevost. I always do that.
It's fine.
That's how good of a friend he is because I mispronounced his name.
Everybody gets it
I just
wrong.
go by Pete. I'd say Pete.
To be fair, I think my family pronounces it the incorrect way.
Yeah.
Like it's actually it's like French, it's Prevost, I think is how it's supposed to be said. But like Prevost is how we say it. But if you
Prevost would be very affected. I think you should go with that.
I know. It's
That'd
pretty
be nice
cool,
to-
right?
Pitt Prevost.
Maybe I should
nice.
be Pierre instead of Pete.
I like it, man.
Pierre
But
Prevost.
honestly, though, this is like
Prévost is
There
the
you
French
go.
pronunciation.
There you go.
so.
Thank you, Tim, for saying it the correct
There
way.
we go.
Tell people that are out there like a little bit about
Yeah.
Briarworks and the whole vibe, and it's because it's really an amazing place. Like,
Yeah.
what year was this building built?
This building was built in 1946.
Love it. Okay.
And it's actually still owned. This building's actually still owned by the family that built it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they built it originally in the 40s, right after World War II, and they had a military contract with, I think, Columbia Machine Works is a local business in town.
Okay.
And they were like making parts, and that's why a lot of the windows in this building are the chicken wire, pebble glass.
Yeah.
Because back in the warehouse, they had a military contract, and so everything was kind of like low key, kind of secretive. So this machine shop was doing some parts for the U.S. government, and they built this building originally for just to lease it to a local machine shop.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, I think Pepsi had this building for a little bit. They were renting it as a warehouse. Then Goodyear Tire had it. They were renting it as a warehouse, and a few other people. And then we'd started the business up in Nashville just over 11 years ago now. And we were just had the pipe factory where we were making pipes up there. And I saw kind of this growth that was happening down here in Columbia. And I thought, man, that'd be a really cool spot. Cause we wanted to open a retail store, but we were like, well, Nashville's got so many great shops. We're not going to try and compete with all these shops in Nashville. Let's kind of get on the outskirts. So that's how we ended up, down here in Columbia. And I found this building the first time I drove down with my wife to look for a building to move us to. We parked in front of this building because we were going to go to the brewery that was just over, adjacent to this across the street. And I looked at this building and it was empty. And I was like, that's the spot. We've got to figure out how to get in it. And it actually took a while to get in this building. I actually had to kind of abandon the idea of being in this space for a while. And because the owner just wouldn't even answer my calls. And everybody told me in town, they're like, oh, forget about it. That building's been empty for years. They're not going to lease it to you. There's whatever. And I was like, whatever. So I kept trying other buildings and then finally got on the phone with the owner of the building. And the coolest thing happened. She finally answered my call and she was like, so what do you guys do? And I was like, well, we're a tobacco pipe factory. So I just got to preface that up front.
Right.
We're going to open a retail store. People are going to be smoking in the building. And I don't know if that's a problem. And she's like, oh my gosh, you guys make tobacco pipes? That's so cool. My family was one of the largest tobacco farmers down here in Murray County.
Oh, wow.
And, I used to go with my dad and my grandpa to all the tobacco auctions at all the tobacco warehouse buildings here in town. We have a deep rooted, family history in tobacco farming.
Fascinating.
And so she was like, not only would I love it if you guys did machine, kind of a machine shop again, because that's what the building originally was for, where you guys are actually producing and manufacturing. But I love the idea of people smoking pipes and cigars in the building because our family has a history in that.
So that was meant to be.
It was meant to be. It
What
finally
year-
happened.
What year was that?
That was in 2018 that we moved in.
Oh, recent. Very somewhat recent then.
Yeah, 6 years ago.
6 years
Yeah.
ago.
So
What a great
2018,
story.
We moved in and then immediately worked on the factory, got that set back up, got back in production. And then in fall of 2018, we actually opened up the lounge here.
Because the building total is how many square feet, Pete?
About 8,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, about 8,000 total.
Even with the factory?
Yeah.
It feels bigger than that for some
It
reason.
does, yeah. Like, and there's even a little section in the back that we just store stuff in. But yeah, it's about 8. It's somewhere between 8 and 9.
Yeah.
you know, somewhere in there.
But Pete, ask me. Actually, I'm curious about this. Like, how did you at first like get into pipes and pipe making? Can you kind of talk about your journey and what? Because I say this just because I feel like that I grew up with pipes around me. We were talking about this earlier
Meerschaum.
because of like Meerschaum pipes
Yeah.
and literally starting it out of our home and then going to see the pipes being made in Turkey. So. You know, and also I visited some briar makers in Germany.
Absolutely.
Like I remember a guy named Jura that I visited.
Yep.
So I'm curious to hear about like how you got into it.
Man, I tell you, I got into it. Well, I first bought a corn cob when I was 18. You know, I just thought it'd be cool to get a pipe, and so I went to the drugstore as soon as I turned 18. Went and bought my first corn cob pipe and some like Captain Black pipe tobacco because me and my buddies thought it'd be cool to smoke a pipe, and so I was kind of loosely into smoking pipes like for a few years. Moved to Nashville from Bakersfield, California.
Oh, okay.
And, in 2005. Yeah, 2005. I was 22 years old.
What brought you to what made
Well,
why Nashville from
I was
Bakersfield?
a musician,
Okay.
and I wasn't looking to do music. I had plenty of friends that tried to move out here for music, and I knew that was a long shot.
Yeah.
So I had met friends, you know, other bands that lived in Nashville. So I just wanted to live out here. And so I packed up and moved out here on a whim, 2005. And when I got here, started valet parking downtown at Union Station.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah.
And so
Was that when they had Arthur's?
Yep.
The rest.
Yep.
That was like the restaurant.
Yeah.
That was my
Literally.
dad's.
Yeah.
That was my dad's favorite.
Dude, that was a nice
like
place,
Arthur's,
man.
yeah.
So yeah, we had people come into the restaurant. I was valet parking their cars
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
time, and so when I got here, like I think it was 3 months I'd worked there, and get a call one day, and it's a road manager that I knew that worked with some bands I knew, and he's like, "Hey, I heard you're in Nashville. Like this band I work with, Sanctus Real, they're looking for another guitar player." I was like, "Oh, I know who they are." So I came and I went and tried out, and then ended up getting that job and joining the band officially a few months after that. And then so for the next almost decade, that was my thing. I was in this band. I was a guitar player in this band, Sanctus Real, and toured all over the world. And
Lead guitar?
well, a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I would say Chris was our lead guitar player. He was one of the founding guys. But I did a lot of rhythm and lead guitar.
That's
I did
great.
banjo and
Oh, awesome.
piano and lap steel, and I was kind of like the auxiliary guy, and just brought all these weird other instruments in that didn't make sense in pop music. But so that was crazy. Like some people don't know that history. I mean, a lot of people do, but ended
that
up
was
getting
like
nominated for a couple Grammys
Really?
during that time, and like.
So was that 05 to 15 roughly?
Yeah, about 14 is when I officially
Okay.
was done with the band. But in 2013 is when we started Briarworks, but I was still kind of transitioning out. But so to get back to that, I was going to say, while I was on tour in 2008, me and our bass player and another guy we were on tour with in a different band, we were like, it'd be fun is like we should make our own pipes. And so we went on this website and we ordered our own pipe kits. And it was like a pre-drilled block of briar with a pre-molded stem. And the plan was we were going to like get our kits shipped to our house. And then when the tour picked back up the next week, we were going to all bring them out. We were going to bring like files and rasps and like hand file and sand these pipes together outside the tour buses, basically.
Oh, wow.
And so my kit arrives and I just look at it and I'm thinking, I can't wait. So I immediately start cutting into mine at home that weekend. And I'm just like tearing. And so when we all show up like a few days later, they are like, "Hey, I got my pipe kit in the mail." And the other guy's like, "Got my pipe kit." And I show them a finished pipe. And they're like, "Dude, what the heck?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, I already ordered another one. So I'll get one." And and they were like all impressed. They're like, "I can't believe you made that." I was like, I didn't do anything else the past 3 days except work on this pipe. Like that's all I did.
What do they give you out of curiosity? What do you get in a pipe kit?
Pipe kit would come with a block of briar that's got the holes already drilled.
Yeah.
A stem already fit into like the end of the pipe.
already fit in there. Okay.
Yeah, but it's a block that's holes and a stem. And then they usually give you a little pack of like powder dye that you mix with it's like a water-based dye. So you add water to it so that you if you want to make it smooth, you can stain it. And they usually give you, I think, maybe some polishing compound or something. It's just a few little pieces like that. But all the tooling you have to get yourself. So,
you have to get. So they don't give you anything to
they have a list.
It.
They have a list of hey, you're going to need a file, and you're going to need a coping saw, and they give you some basic list of tools and sandpapers that you want to get.
See, if I'd seen that list, I would have tapped out and be okay, I'm going to go buy a pipe. I was I don't need the list.
So then I just was all in at that point. I was I bought another kit, and then I made that one. I made another kit, and then I just was super excited about this idea of getting into pipe making. I met a really well-known in the pipe world pipe maker named Jody Davis. Jody is also a guitar player in a band called the Newsboys. And Jody was a guy I really respected as a musician, but also is a world-renowned pipe carver. And so I met him at the Nashville Pipe Club when we were meeting up in East Nashville. And Jody was hey, you should come to my shop. I'll teach you how to do things proper. So I went over to Jody's and I started working on pipes there at his shop, which was huge for me because I really looked up to and admired him.
Is he still around?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
And so Jody and I worked in the shop on a few pipes, and then he introduced me to another pipe maker named Todd Johnson. They were close friends. And he was you should really go to Todd's shop because you and I, we're both on tour all the time. Our schedules never align to be at home at the same time. And he's so you guys should go so he introduced me to Todd, and then Todd and I started working together, and Todd, really started teaching me everything. And I think after a couple years of working with Todd, at that point I was making my fully handmade pipes. I was going to some of the little regional pipe shows and the Chicago show and some of the big pipe shows, and I was selling my handmades. And then about 2013 or 2012, that's when I was at this point kind of looking to get off the road. Mm-hmm. My wife and I had 2 kids at this point. Felt like I was missing out on everything because I was gone 200 plus days a year on tour.
Oh, wow.
And so Todd was hey, I'm thinking about starting a pipe factory. Would you want to do that? And I was yeah. So that's when we got, involved, got a couple investors that he knew. And that's when we launched Briarworks in 2013. And the idea behind it was, let's have a US made, good quality factory pipe that, looks and feels and smokes like one of our high grade handmades, but at a fraction of the price. Yeah. Instead of a, several hundred or several $1,000 pipe, we're talking $100 to $300 pipe. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did. And that's when we got going, was in 2013. And then, initially just was up in Nashville making pipes. And then in 2018, that's when I moved us down here. At that point, I had taken over running the day-to-day operations of the company and just loved what was happening in Columbia. Thought it'd be cool to get down here. So
yeah, I remember
You had the foresight for sure.
Yeah, and it's blown up. Columbia has been exploding the past 5-6 years.
Now I remember when we started with CAO with pipes, then we got into we distributed some Briars at some point in time. We had Chacombe, which were made in France, which were more reasonable, but nice, smaller pipes out of France. And then also we had some that were called Preben Homes. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember.
But that was, do you remember?
Hands, yeah.
I remember
so
that.
Preben Home was an interesting guy because those were more freehand, meaning he would go with the flow of the Briar.
Yeah, the freehand, Danish freehands.
That's right. That's right. I mean, and he had a nice following. Yeah. So when you get maybe you can explain to folks, can you explain to them what, not to kind of go too deep to geek out on Briars, but where does a Briar, can you talk about where the Briar comes from in the tree? And then where do you source Briar generally?
So Briar it's the scientific name is Erica arborea, and it's a shrub tree that grows only around the Mediterranean. For whatever reason, it's a wild shrub tree that grows all around that region, around the Mediterranean.
So none in the U.S. It's it's on the Mediterranean regions.
Only. They've tried to plant it.
I was going to say, can you?
They've tried. Because there used to be tons of factories in the U.S. and they tried to plant it here,
And it
it
wouldn't-
wouldn't
Do you
grow.
know- is it-
Something
it's just
about
a
the
shrub
climate.
tree, though.
It's
It's
a
not
shrub
like a-
tree. Yeah, it's this flowering shrub tree, grows all over the hills and mountains all around the Mediterranean. You see it everywhere, and it's called a heath tree. That's what they call it. And the root burl, it's got this big round like root burl that's the
Is it
briar.
is it in the ground or is it appear above ground? The burl
the burl is in ground?
in ground.
Yeah, and you've got this like tree trunk that
Yeah.
grows to be about this big around, maybe a little bit bigger.
Oh, that's it.
That grows out of the ground. But the root burl is this round ball like root burl, and the crazy thing about it is, it's a weed basically. It's this wild like shrub tree that grows all over, and typically I don't know exactly how early they could harvest one out of the ground, but from what I understand about it, you're talking like 20 to 50 years that these things are growing before they pull them up out of the ground. And then they go like, I mean, we're talking old school. They still go with a donkey and a cart into the mountains with a shovel and a pickaxe.
Yeah.
And they're chopping these things down and pulling them out. And then they take them and they load them up in a truck or whatever. They drive them to like one of the local briar mills that they're going to sell it to. And then they dump it into like the basement of their briar mill where it's like damp and wet. And like they just dump all these big round burls down there and they keep them. They go down there. I've been to Italy, which one of our suppliers is in Italy. We got one in Greece as well. And they go down this basement. I've watched them do it, multiple times a day with a water hose, and they'll keep all of it wet because they don't want it to dry and crack. So they keep it wet down there until they're ready to cut it. And once they take it up to the mill, they have these, like, I'm talking like, it's like a table saw that they sit at. Like, it's terrifying. OSHA would like lose their mind. They could never do this in the US. They get this 22-inch like saw blade that's just like open on this like, and they sit between it.
No.
And they take this huge burl and they just like start cutting into it. They look at the grain and they start dissecting this thing down, knocking all the flaws out of it. And then when you look at the briar, it's really like rough cut because it's just freehand cut into these blocks. And once they cut them into blocks, then they have to go and they put it all in these bags. They take it to like a big vat of water. They boil it for like 18 hours. They legally have to boil it to get all the impurities out of it before they can sell it. So for 18 hours at least, they have to like
They're boiling it.
Boiling all the impurities out of the wood. And then they take it and they put it on these racks and they slow dry it for several months. And like I think that part of the way that it works well in that region is you're around the Mediterranean. You get this coastal air, good climate, and so not too humid, not too hot, but just the right amount of humidity that like it doesn't really split and crack as it's drying. They just let nature basically dry.
They're
this
not
stuff.
doing it in open air. This is inside
the building. Yeah.
Inside the building.
And then after a few months or whatever, then they can ship it out, export it wherever it needs to go.
But they have probably different quality, kind of like A quality, B quality, that kind of
different
thing.
grading systems. Every briar cutter has their own grading system, but generally they have like general sizing that they all
I was going to ask
use.
about sizes. So they like
different
blake
sizes,
them in different block sizes.
And then they have like different gradings that they use. So for like a handmade pipe, like if I'm doing like a high quality handmade pipe, I'm usually buying like a better quality grade briar. And those can range from, 10 to 15 bucks for a little block of wood up to $60, $70, $80 for just a little block. And then the factory stuff, that's more like in the sub $10 range. But it just depends on the quality. Cause we even, for our factory pipes, we'll use even some of the better quality stuff. Just because if it's one of our lines where it's a more expensive pipe, we obviously want like a better quality grain if we can get it. But it's kind of a crapshoot. Like with briar, man, you look at the outside of it and you think like, oh man, I've got this like beautiful looking, no flaws. I spent $50 on this block of briar. I'm gonna get an amazing smooth out of it. You start carving into it. Next thing you know, you run into a huge like pit in the side of it. and it might be trash, or you might be able to sandblast it and get like a textured finish and get that flaw to kind of disappear.
Now talk about that for a moment, because I remember, like, again, sorry to kind of get into the weeds on this kind of stuff. It's bringing back
It's
some
probably interesting
memories.
for some people,
So, like, talk about sandblast, because sandblasting was a big deal. My perception of, talk about what is sandblasting?
Yeah.
How do you sandblast? When would you sandblast?
Yeah.
What are the effects of it?
I think in a perfect world, because you can charge more money for them, any factory, if they could, they would just do like smooth pipes, because everybody loves the glossy, smooth pipe. It looks beautiful. The problem with Briar's got tons of little pits and flaws in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's rarely ever perfectly clean. So in order to make a smooth pipe, you've got to have it be very free of flaws. It can only have little teeny tiny pits on it that if you're going to make it smooth. So most of the time, I'd say like 8 out of 10 pipes, you're going to have to either what we call rusticate or sandblast the pipe. You're probably going to get like 2 smooths out of like 10 pipes, and if that. And so here's the different breakdowns. Smooth is, you're sanding it with several different grits. You're getting it to like a very smooth finish with like no flaws, no scratches. And then you're staining it with like an alcohol-based stain. Mm-hmm. And then you're buffing it back. You're getting that beautiful pop of contrast with the grain. Sandblast it literally is like a sandblasting cabinet. Like, you'd see it like a parts shop where they're sandblasting metal parts. It's glass bead, like abrasive material.
Okay.
Put your hand through the little cabinet, and you've got like this like pressurized, little gun that's basically shooting out this abrasive material, and you're blasting the pipe. And what's happening is as you're attacking the briar with this abrasive material, it's eating away all the softwood in between the growth rings and in between the bird's eye. Mm-hmm. And so it's naturally forming this like texture that's revealing all these like cool growth rings that are unique to that pipe. Rusticated is a little bit different. Rusticated is what I would call a man-made sandblast almost. It's more of a textured finish where we could we use like this wire brush wheel. And so we'll sit down, and if it needs to be, textured, we'll carve basically these like lines into the pipe, and give it this like sort of textured look. And so there's a few different finishes that we can do, but I would say 80% of the pipes almost are probably going to be either a sandblast or rusticated. And maybe that other 10 to 20%, we're going to be able to get like a smooth finish out of. So that's why smooths are more expensive, because they're more rare. You just can't get smooths all the time. I
remember it was a big deal whenever you'd find a pipe that had, I know it was like tight grain. Look at the tight grain. Is what like John. So when you had like certain Preben homes that were the most expensive ones, the grain was like really tight. Is that how it goes normally?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, but I think the straight grain thing is ultimately that really tight, like beautiful, like straight grain. That's like kind of the ultimate when it comes to like pipes. I think for a lot of people, it's that smooth finish with that really tight straight grain. Personally, I love a sandblasted pipe. I love the natural growth rings. I like the texture. Almost all of my personal pipes are sandblasted. Like that's just my favorite finish. Also because like I don't want to have to take super nice care of them, and they're just more durable. Whereas a smooth, it's like you set it down wrong one time, you have a big old ding in the side of it. Man.
Yeah.
So I kind of like being able to like beat them up a little bit because they're really durable. So it's like sandblast is the way to go for me. But
is briar the only wood? Mm-mm. What other woods can you use to make a pipe?
Mostly briar.
Yeah.
That's the most common. Some people use olive wood. Olive wood's really hard. And it looks really cool. It's got its own cool, unique grain pattern to it. So olive wood pipes are pretty commonly made. Morta is probably the coolest one. So Morta, it's also called bog oak. And it is this oak that, like, picture this. Okay. A lot of it comes from like Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. And like thousands of years ago, you've got these like oak tree trunks that would fall over or get knocked down and fall into these like bogs, these like, and lay in the water for like a few thousand years. And almost becoming like petrified wood. And over time, all the minerals and the water and everything with like what's going on with the pipe, with the wood of the oak tree, it kind of like discolors it to this almost black color. So then they harvest these tree trunks out of the water, and then they cut them into blocks of mortar, and they're black. It's like this oak wood that is like a charcoal gray to like a black. The more black it is, the older it is. And but even the stuff that we've bought, we're talking 3,000 to 4,000 year old wood that like
crazy.
And it has this really cool like just natural black coloring to it, and it actually makes for like a really good pipe. The downside about Morta is like it's oak and it's more like open, the grain. It's more porous. Briar's very dense. That's why Briar is like the most popular wood to use, because Briar is extremely dense, and you can light a flame to it, forever basically, and it doesn't burn up unless you're like, just sitting there holding it on the briar. But like if you're lighting up a bowl of tobacco, you're not going to damage the wood. Morta is fine, but the thing I'll say about Morta is like on like the shank of the pipe where you're fitting the stem and stuff, it's more common that it might crack the shank because the wood's a little bit more open grain.
So
Briar,
expensive then.
So Briar's definitely and olive wood too. Those are probably the most commonly used woods because they're very dense, they're very hard, and they're not going to break as easily.
Is there a different flavor that you get from them too?
Yes, but like the way that we make pipes and a lot of pipe factories make pipes, we actually go ahead and we kind of put this, like they call it pre-carb, but like we do a bowl coating inside the bowl to help with the break-in process. It also protects the wall of the pipes. Mm-hmm. It's all food grade ingredients, but basically it's like a charcoal, like, that like you use activated charcoal, and you basically like sort of paint this like bowl coating inside of the pipe. Now, meerschaum, you don't do this. Like meerschaum, that's what I think people love about meerschaum is like, there's something about that stone and the way that like it absorbs like the flavoring differently. Mm-hmm. And that's what people love about meerschaum is you can take a meerschaum pipe and it has a very neutral taste. Mm-hmm. And like you can smoke different tobaccos in it, and it doesn't really affect, like it doesn't absorb the same way. Whereas Briar and like other woods, like when you first smoke a raw block of Briar, you're going to taste that wood more. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we do the pre-carbonized bowl. And so that way, when you first smoke it, you have this more neutral taste.
Yeah, it's muted a bit.
It's muted. Yeah. You're not having to smoke like dozens of bowls through it to get through that initial like, wood flavor that you're kind of getting. And so I think that's the thing about meerschaum pipes that people do love is the fact that like from the very first smoke, you've got this really like kind of neutral flavor. Clay pipes are also really big too. That's been around way before, Briar, where they had these old tavern pipes, that they would have, and they would have these, they were made from clay, and, they were really long. And the reason they were really long was because they would have them at the little tavern pubs and stuff. And guys would go in there and they would get they would use the house clay pipe. And after they smoked it, they could just break off a piece to sanitize it, and it just kept getting shorter and shorter. And they'd throw it away.
I didn't know that. That's
cool. And so they would start with these really long pipes, and over time they would get shorter and shorter because they would just break off a little piece each time from where someone had smoked it before.
But you mentioned also you started with corncob pipes. So like what? Yeah. So what is kind of like what's the allure of a corncob pipe? Or what's the kind of taste?
I think corncob pipes really became popular because it was inexpensive, and so some of our really good friends up in Missouri Meerschaum, they're like the old school, and their history is incredible. They've been around 155 years.
Oh wow!
Up in Washington, Missouri, and they brought power to the city. Like everything, like that town is built around this corncob pipe factory. They actually have their own special. They worked with one of the universities up there to develop their own corn crop. And it's pipe corn. It literally is made because, like a corn cob, you've got like your corn kernels, which is like a large part of it. And you got your little like core, right? Well, they wanted corn that had a bigger core and the kernels to be smaller because they wanted to use it for like turning bowls out of.
Yeah.
So they developed their own pipe corn, essentially. So they've got their own farm fields out there where they actually harvest.
So it's almost like a hybrid. It's a hybridized corn, just that has a bigger kind of core.
Yeah. And what's cool about corn cobs, and we push people on corn cobs all the time because it's a great way to start. If you don't want to invest, $150, $200 into a pipe, if you want to make sure you just enjoy the hobby, you can buy a $10, $15 corn cob pipe and you can smoke that. And
do you taste any corn from that?
Not really. It does have its own like kind of unique taste to it initially, but like I wouldn't say it has like that sort of flavor to it. Maybe because it's coming from the core. I don't know. Like personally, I never got like any sort of a corn flavor out of it. But it's a really fascinating company as well. And one thing that like I love to tell people about is when we started this pipe factory, we were really at that point one of the only U.S. pipe factories in existence because all of them had either closed. It used to be a big boom here. You had K Woody and Graybo and all these other factories in the U.S. that were huge. They all eventually either closed or the brand sold, and then they moved overseas, the production, and went to Italy or different countries. Right. And so when we first started, we're really one of the only U.S. pipe factories. Graybo still is in existence. I don't know if they're really doing much U.S. based or they're out of North Carolina, but Graybo is more like the drugstore Briar pipe, and then there's us. And then there's Missouri Meerschaum, the corn cob factory. So like we're a couple of the only factories in the U.S. and they're great friends of ours. We actually have done some collaborations where we have a pipe shape that we make. They start the bowls with the corn cob. We finish it here with our own stem.
But do they actually do Meerschaum, or are they're just called Missouri Meerschaum, but it's mainly corn cob?
Yeah, it's corn cob. They're called Missouri Meerschaum because I think at that point when they started, Meerschaum pipes were already a thing.
Yeah.
And they wanted to like sort of be like, oh, we're like, corn cob is the natural material. It's the Meerschaum of Missouri.
Marketing. It's a good marketing kind of thing.
That's why they're called Missouri Meerschaum. But at least that's what I think I don't know that for sure, but I think that's why they call it that. But
I remember my dad would always talk about like, Meerschaum and the fact that it's like a natural filter, just because it's like, small, like, crustacea that have like fossilized into this mineral that's, very porous. So then they can put it in water. It absorbs the water and it becomes soft, and you can carve any sort of shape or face into it. Then it has to be dried almost like in a kiln before they put the beeswax over it. But I remember him saying that, and I wasn't like a huge pipe smoker, but obviously I was around it, So then I tried it, and it's got this cool feeling to it too, because of the fact that it's a natural filter, which I thought was really interesting and unique. Yeah. But I guess Briars or like the more wood pipes, they have. Do they burn more hot typically, or not necessarily?
They do. They can. And it really all depends. It's like a cigar. Yeah. It depends on the person who's smoking it. If they're roasting that thing and just puffing on every 3 seconds, then that cigar is going to burn down really quick. It's probably not going to taste very good either. But like same thing with a pipe. It's like if you're smoking a pipe and you're trying to keep a slow pace with it, keep it burning cool, then you're going to get more flavor out of that tobacco. You're going to enjoy it more. You're not going to like sizzle your tongue, So I always try and teach people when they're learning about pipes, it's important to keep it burning as cool as you can. People are always worried about keeping a pipe lit. I'm like, don't even worry about that. Keep a little Bic lighter, some matches, whatever. Keep it burning as cool as you can because you're going to enjoy the tobacco more. You're going to get more flavor out of it. If it goes out, it goes out. Just relight it. It's no big deal.
How do you do that, keeping it as cool as you can? Does that mean just not smoking it rapidly?
Packing it properly so that it's not jammed too tight or too loose. That's important. But a lot of it's just the pace. It's like over time, you want to develop like the sort of pace that you just naturally develop to where you keep it burning, but you keep it to where it's not just like putting off plumes of smoke. You want it to burn like as slow as possible. If it goes out, it goes out. That's why I like, don't worry about relighting a pipe. It's better to keep it burning cool, enjoy that tobacco. If you're trying to burn it too hot, you're going to burn your tongue. the pipe in your hand is going to be blazing hot. You might even crack it because if you burn it too high, that's not likely to happen. But over years of doing that, you're going to crack the pipe.
Yeah.
And then you're also not going to enjoy it. Like the tobacco is not going to taste good. Just like a cigar. It's like if you're roasting that thing and burning it at 100 miles an hour, it's going to taste nasty. It's not going to have all those good nuances that you're supposed to get from the tobaccos,
So we're smoking cigars right now. So I'm going to ask you, like on a day-to-day basis, what do you find yourself going more towards, a cigar or a pipe? Or is it pretty even?
I'd say more cigars because of the retail store.
Okay.
Got reps coming in, trying different stuff.
Yeah.
I would say my ultimate preference is probably a pipe because that's what I started with. Mm-hmm. I know more about pipes. I've just had more years of experience with pipes. But over the past several years of, having the pipe factory and then opening the lounge here, I've gotten more into cigars, getting to know guys like you and learning more about, cigars has really opened up that world to me a lot more. So it's pretty even, honestly. I would say a little bit more on the cigar side just because I'm trying new things for the store more often. And, most of the tobaccos that I smoke at this point with pipes, I know the ones I like. Mm-hmm. So I kind of gravitate towards the same things. There might be a special new thing that I might get to try, but for the most part, I have my go-to pipe tobaccos that I stick with. Whereas cigars, I feel like I'm still learning. I'm still trying so much. Yeah. I mean, even with pipe tobacco, I don't know everything. It's like,
I asked the question because I've always felt like when I first started working for your dad in 96, one of the first things I did was I bought a meerschaum from CAO, and it was a Bacchus. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And I was like enthralled with like learning how to, but I just quickly learned that like, you get the tobacco and you got to tamp it, you got to light it. It was like, I gave up after 2 weeks. I'm like, this is too much work. And I just fell in love with cigars. And I was just like, so I've always felt like there's either a pipe guy or a cigar guy. And usually they don't cross over that much. Because
not as much for sure.
Like to smoke a pipe requires to me a lot of patience. Yeah. And like, just the process you described about how they got the briar and it's like 3,000 years old, this, that, and the other. It's so different with cigars. Cigars are like you cut it, you light it, you smoke it. And it's, there's
simple.
more immediate gratification than smoking a pipe. You don't have to sit down and, actually manage the process as much.
Yeah. I would say with pipes, and this is what we always try and teach people here. I think we've tried to break down some of those barriers, because there's a lot of people that will try a pipe because they think it sounds cool. And then they have nobody show them the ropes. No one teaches them how to pack the tobacco properly. Everybody tells them, oh, you got to keep it lit. If you don't keep it lit, you're doing it wrong. So we try to like sort of break down some of those walls and tell people like, listen, this is a no pressure situation. Don't worry about it. Don't stress out. Try this out. Pack the pipe this way. Don't worry about keeping it lit, and I think that helps people get into it more because they're set up for success, whereas like they're set up for failure if nobody teaches them that. And if everybody thinks like, oh, if I don't keep this pipe lit, I'm doing it wrong, then they give up after one or two tries and they say, I can't do it. It's not for me. I'm going to smoke a cigar.
Totally.
It's not uncommon. It happens all the time with people.
I remember even my first trade shows, the RTDA at that time was in Cincinnati. I remember going and seeing how, because at that time CAO was still doing meerschaum pipes as well as humidors, and we'd just gotten into cigars. And it was just interesting to watch how people would sit down for like hours picking pipes, like with Bill Hill. Yeah. And they would just sit there and they would like analyze every pipe. Meanwhile, like cigars, it was like, okay, how many boxes you want of that? Boom, 3, 4, 5, bam, 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 bam. Next. You know what I mean? It was just like a real much quicker process. And pipes were like so like, I don't want to say labor intensive, but there was more attention put towards that.
Yeah. And I think the thing about pipes that I think separates them from cigars is obviously you can collect cigars. I mean, obviously people have massive humidors and huge collection, aging cigars, all that.
Sure.
Same thing with pipes. I mean, like pipe tobacco, you can age pipe tobacco and it gets better as you age it.
See, I didn't know that.
That's where I think the sort of collector nerdy side of pipes comes into play. Is like you've got not only are guys like drawn towards like actually collecting the pipes themselves. You get one, you're like, oh, I kind of want another one. It's like tattoos, right? It's like,
yeah, a little bit.
It's like they start to, you get a few and you're like, oh, I want some more. It's like pipes, right? Over time, you're going to be like drawn towards collecting more pipes to rotate through and have in your collection. With pipe tobacco, here's what I love about pipe tobacco. Almost everybody starts with aromatics. Aromatics usually have some sort of flavoring added to them. It's the quality of the tobacco is typically a lower grade quality, but they smell nice. Right. So like nobody really knows that. They go into the shop, they smell the tobacco, they think, oh man, it smells amazing. Mm-hmm. But what they don't realize until you really get into pipes is that like usually the taste of it is not like the smell of it.
Right.
Mm. So you go and you smell this jar of tobacco and you think that smells incredible. And then you light it up, you start smoking it.
You're expecting that flavor.
You don't even taste that flavor, right. And you don't even really smell it, honestly. When you're smoking it, it smells completely different. But everybody around you is like, wow, that smells really good. That reminds me of my grandpa or whatever. Mm-hmm. But what people learn over time when they really get into pipes is you've got your straight tobaccos. You've got stuff that doesn't have flavoring added to it.
Is that like the English?
Yeah, like English is one. Yeah. And like, or Virginia, Virginia Perique blends. So you've got your Virginia tobaccos that are like, and your burleys that are grown in this region. And it's really about how the tobacco is processed more than anything. Mm-hmm. So you've got, like burleys that are like, they got the barns, they hang them up in the barns. You got your Kentucky dark fired where they actually smoke the tobacco and get that real meaty sort of like pork smell to them. Sorry about the flies, by the way. I don't know. The flies are going crazy this morning.
I did shower, I promise.
No, they're all over. It's all of us apparently. So then you've got your Perique. That's a really unique one. Perique is Louisiana. That's only made down in like this one area in Louisiana, St. James, parish or whatever, and they actually barrel ferment this tobacco. And it ends up like it's funky. It's like weird. It's kind of like, I hate to like use this description, but I mean it kind of smells like gym socks. It's not good. It's strong. It's this potent smell. But what it does when you blend it in a pipe tobacco blend is it adds like this like sort of tanginess and this spice. It adds this pepperiness. And so like Virginia Perique is my favorite. I mean that's like you get your Virginia blend with your Perique, a little bit of Perique in it, and it has this really, sort of delicate, nuanced flavor of tobaccos, but you also get that little spiciness and like funkiness from the Perique. And those ones age amazing. So like you get your tin of tobacco that's like sealed in this like, airtight sealed tin. And I never thought I would get into this, but like I totally became one of these nerds, like I've got this cabinet at home. It's just filled with tobaccos, like I've some that I bought like, 15 plus years ago that like are still unopened. I wrote the date on them, threw them away.
So they age like when you have them still in there.
The sugars in the tobacco break down over time and they become sweeter on their own. And so when you pop a tin of tobacco that's been aging for 7, 8, 9, or like even up to 30, 40 years, it just depends on how long you want to age it. Yeah. You pop that tin open and it's been airtight sealed for all those years. And what's happened is the natural sugars in the tobacco have started to break down. And all of a sudden it smells like fruit. It's like you've got this like raspberry smell coming from this natural tobacco. And it's incredible. And it's darkened. It went from like this bright Virginia, like golden color to like almost this dark black like color. And it's really actually fascinating what happens with tobacco over time. I never thought of some that. Blends, like some English blends, those are like, they have Latakia. So Latakia, that's like, Cyprian, Syrian Latakia, all this stuff. It's a smoked tobacco as well, where they smoke it with like all these different spices and, has this really unique aroma to it. The problem with aging English blends is the Latakia actually starts to dissipate. It disappears over the year. So that real smoky smell, it kind of fades off. But actually that's what I think some people like about aging it, because some people don't love too much of that smoky smell. So they actually like aged English blends, but some people don't like aged English because they think it's like, I really want that smokiness that you get. And if you wait too long, it starts to fade off over time.
Did you ever get into pipe tobacco for Briarworks, or have you, or do you? I mean, like you do. You have your own like.
Yeah. So actually, Cornell and Deal out of South Carolina, they actually about almost 10 years ago. This next year will be 10 years. We launched our own line. They come in mason jars. We launched our own line of tobacco, Briarworks tobaccos, that they actually blend and make for us. And Jeremy Reeves, who's the head blender there, phenomenal knowledge on tobacco. Someday you guys need to actually sit down with Jeremy, because he's just...
Before we started shooting this, you mentioned his name, and which brought me to a different question I wanted to ask. And that is, like, what is your opinion of how recently cigars have started to incorporate pipe tobaccos? Like, for instance, Drew Estate did that Kentucky Fire Cure, right?
Yep.
And now recently Steve Saka did the Stillwell Star,
and that was
which Jeremy had a.
Yep.
How do you think that works?
So that actually is pretty cool, because Jeremy has, like, he loves cigars, and he does have a pretty good knowledge base on cigars, but he's never been like a cigar blender or anything like that. But he enjoys cigars already before they got into this project with Steve Saka. But Jeremy has his passion is all in on tobaccos. I mean, he loves tobacco. He'll talk to anybody for hours that's willing to talk to him about it.
Yeah.
And he just knows so much about it. I love asking him questions. And he worked with Steve on this project where he wanted to incorporate, Latakia into like a cigar, which is hard to do, because that's just something that, like, Latakia overpowers everything. It's like that's what they use in English blends, and it's just like super strong, potent, smoky smell. It overpowers everything. So to be able to put that into a cigar and have it still taste like a cigar is not an easy challenge. And then they also wanted to use Perique in a cigar, and they wanted to use aromatic. They wanted to do aromatic. And I think all of them turned out really good. I was actually pretty impressed with the project. I don't know that it really exploded. I don't even know if they expected it to. I think that it was more of a passion project. They wanted to try it out. I think they knew that the market for it was going to maybe be kind of unique. It was going to be that crossover market of pipe guys and cigar guys. But it did work out pretty well, I think. I don't know if they're still doing a lot with it or not, if they kind of just, abandoned it or not. But it's I thought they turned out great. I liked how the cigars turned out. But so Jeremy did all of our blends, and that was kind of a fun, unique venture into the tobacco side of things.
Do you sell them just here, or do you sell them
they have their own distribution, and so they actually distribute them to other stores. For us, the reason to get into it was because we had launched the pipe factory, right? And we wanted to get our foot in the door with stores, but we were this new pipe brand out there that nobody cared about. Nobody knew about it. And so I was calling all these different shops, around the country, trying to sell them our pipes. And most of them were just like, oh yeah, we sell Peterson, Savinelli, some Meerschaum. We're not really interested. So I was just getting the door closed in my face everywhere I went. And we were hoping to get into more shops. And so part of it for me was let's work with Cornell and Deal, because they have a big reach. They've got reps out there selling, Savinelli pipes and Peterson. And this tobacco, they've got their presence in every pipe shop in the country. So if we do a tobacco with them and they distribute it, they're going to be selling Briarworks tobaccos into all these stores. And then hopefully some of those stores might want our pipes. And it worked. All of a sudden, the same stores that were shutting the door in our face were calling us and saying, hey, we have your pipe tobacco. It's pretty cool. We should get some of your pipes for the store. So for us, that was a little bit of, strategic, planning to try and get our foot in the door with stores. But also we just thought it would be cool to have our own tobaccos too. Yeah. And it is. It's really nice. But it's not like we really make money off of the tobacco side of it. It's pretty small for us. We get a royalty. They distribute it. They do all that. But it's more of having that product out there, sort of rounding out the portfolio of what we have and really getting our foot in the door with other retail shops.
Now, let me ask this, because, obviously there are a lot of shapes that you have for pipes, and you have some pipes that are, I remember growing up thinking, standard, meaning not for meerschaum, not carved. Then you have carved heads,
Yeah.
like Bacchus
Right.
would be a
Yeah.
carved head. So, but there's so many shapes. What shape pipe is your preferred shape? And why do the shapes matter? Do they change in how they taste for people?
Yeah. So the shapes are, I would say more than anything, they're aesthetic.
Okay.
It's more about what your preference is. It's like, I like the way this curved pipe looks. It looks really cool how it kind of like hangs off your chin, They do smoke a little bit different. Like the length of the pipe can definitely affect it slightly. So you got your real long like church warden pipes, you know? It has more time for it to cool down.
I see.
So like the longer the pipe, the more that the smoke's going to kind of cool. And then like straight pipes, I find that my preference is straight pipe. I like a straight, just like pipe. I tend to smoke like more like shorter pipes. I just kind of like, something that like
how it feels,
doesn't add too much weight, I think straight pipes are a little bit easier to smoke only because when you have the bent pipe, you've got gravity working against you.
Yeah.
So naturally like moisture is going to build up as it's like connected to your mouth. And like you might get some of that like, moisture like kind of running down into the pipe. And you got to run a pipe cleaner through it while you're smoking it to absorb that moisture.
I see. Interesting.
They're a little bit more like time consuming, I feel like, to deal with, but I would say bent pipes are mostly the most popular ones because of the visual look of them. I think
is it because it like also can hug your face sometimes?
Yes, I think that people like
they
like the curves, they like the way it looks, they like that it kind of hangs down. Whereas a straight pipe, it's a little more just like simple looking. And back in the, let's say the 1940s, 50s, straight pipes were like way more popular. And I think over time, for whatever reason, with the Danish freehands, we were talking about that earlier, like Prevenholm. I think the curved pipes kind of became more popular because just they liked the visual aesthetic of it and the way that it looked. But my preference personally is a straight pipe.
So like as far as the shape is concerned, because there's like billiards, bulldogs, I mean, no kind of, in a bulldog more is where the bowl at the top is like a bit tapered in, right? And you have
it has the diamond shank.
Yeah.
So that the bulldog, it has like the shank of the pipe, instead of being round or like oval, it has like hard, edges, and it's got this almost like diamond shank to it. And then at the top of the bowl, about, a quarter inch down or half an inch down, they carve these like lines into the pipe. For whatever reason, that's called a bulldog.
Yeah,
I don't know the history on the
really
name of the bulldog.
Yeah.
There's some pipe shapes I know like there's a Prince, and that's the Prince Albert. So Prince Albert, they named it after him apparently.
Yeah, and there's one called Dublin.
Yeah. And again, I don't know why it's called a Dublin, but I could tell you another one.
I would imagine it came from Dublin, right?
Right. I mean, I guess that's maybe that was an origin with Peterson. I'm not sure.
Maybe.
A lot of their shapes do have that shape, so I would think, there's probably some history there with Peterson and the Dublin. Umpal, that's an interesting one. Umpal is that super curved bent pipe. It's a full bend. It's got a really unique look, and they call it Umpal, which is such a weird name.
Yeah, like that Sherlock Holmes thing? Or?
Yeah.
That's a calabash.
That's a calabash,
Okay.
yeah.
I was going to ask about the calabash
it's really
next.
bent like that, but the Umpal shape is called that because there was, I think it was I think it's like South African maybe. They call stands for uncle. And his name was like Paul, something's Uncle Paul, basically, or something like that. So again, that was like his like shape and like whatever. So there's all these weird little historical like things you learn over time with pipes. But I don't know all the history of all the names. I should probably know more of them. But like calabash. So what the calabash is?
That's the Sherlock Holmes.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So that is actually typically it comes from a gourd. They use the pipe body itself as a gourd, and it's actually
which is a squash.
Yeah,
Right.
it's hollow inside.
Yeah,
and then they used meerschaum.
that's right.
For the cap.
Yeah.
On a lot of them, so they would use a meerschaum bowl as this removable cap, and you've got this big, like long pipe, and they would get huge sometimes, and this hollowed gourd. What it does is when you pack your tobacco up in that like meerschaum cap or whatever the cap's made out of, that is like a hollow chamber in this calabash, and it like the smoke kind of swirls around in this big chamber. By the time it gets to your mouth, it's cooled down quite a bit. So it had this like cooling effect that would happen with it. And over time, they've used different materials. We actually make a all briar calabash.
Oh yeah.
It's
Nice.
pretty cool. And like we actually hollow out a block of briar the same way. It looks the same and everything. It's like making 4 pipes to make one of them. I mean, it takes forever.
Now I remember we got in like at one point in time, like a bunch of gourd from Africa.
Yep.
And they would have different organic shapes to them, so you had different shapes of like gourd calabashes where the top was meerschaum.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point we had like a bit of a chamois, like a bit of almost like a soft fabric of different colors we'd put on the outside of it.
Oh, wow.
They were beautiful pipes.
Yeah.
And we called them the chamois calabash.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to see if we have any of those
I'd
in
love
the
to see
archive.
that. The calabash is that's a very interesting shape. And it's a very unique pipe. They smoke different because of that hollow chamber. They have like a hollow feel to them. It's weird. They smoke like more, the draw is a little different, I should say. It feels different, like as you like puff on it.
Yeah.
Whereas like a typical pipe, you've got this small little draft hole running through the pipe that's real concentrated. The smoke's coming directly through that channel. This is like this big open chamber, so they have like a different draw to them.
And people ask all the time, I'll ask you, do you think that pipes nowadays, like people say, I hear every now and then, pipes are making a comeback or not, or what's your read on that? Your take on that? Is it very still like, is it very niche, or has it broadened a bit, or
a little bit? Pretty niche still, I would say.
Yeah.
But there has been in the past couple decades, really the past decade, plus, there has been a younger generation that has gotten into pipes, and it's kind of like that whole like craft movement that's happened, where people have gotten into like just really appreciating like the handmade thing. They appreciate craft beer and distilled, small batch whiskeys, and then they love hand making their own stuff at home. And like I think with that whole craft movement, handmade goods, people have kind of like developed an appreciation for pipes because it feels nostalgic and has like this old school kind of vibe to it. So with the hipster movement, I would say pipes have, really taken off with like that kind of crowd that really just appreciates like nostalgic things. But pipes have always had a very small, loyal following. And I think each generation develops its own sort of followers with the pipes. It's not nearly as big as the cigar industry. I mean, at one point it was bigger than the cigar industry. Over time, that they shifted.
Right.
You talked about Chacombe earlier. I mean, their factory there in France, they're in St. Claude. That's where Briar factories started, was in St. Claude. And at one point, they're making millions of pipes a year. And now it's not that case. They're making less production. So I think that like pipes still have a very strong, loyal following, but they're not nearly as big as they used to be. But there is a little bit of a growth that's happening. I've seen that. Even the handful of years that we've been here, I've definitely seen a little bit of rise in like the sales of pipes that have come up.
Is the number one country for pipes, is it U.S. or is it other countries?
I think Europe and U.S. are probably still the biggest markets. China's become a very big market for pipes.
That's interesting.
They have a lot of factories that have popped up in China over the past several years. And a lot of it is the more high-end luxury side of it, because I think with some of the people that are just filthy rich in China, that's part of their whole thing is they want to have luxurious things.
But they're not getting Briar from China now, are they? Did they figure out Briar in China?
I got to be honest, they're taking a lot of the Briar from the Mediterranean. A lot of the Chinese factories are getting a lot of that Briar.
Has that been has it led to like an increase in price on Briar generally?
Not so much an increase in price, but scarcity.
I see.
It's been for us. We only make, and maximum we're making 300 pipes a month. So us getting Briar has not been a problem, But some of the European factories are having a tougher time getting briar because I think what's happening is the Chinese factories that are trying to really develop and take off, they are coming over with cash in that country's, currency, and they're paying them off the books, so they're not having to, they're able to come in and say, here, we'll give you cash for all this briar, and they'll take
So
give them a premium for it and pay and take all the pallets. So I would say for some of the larger factories in Europe, it has become a little bit more challenging. The ones that are making 10,000 pipes a month, it's harder for them to get briar. For us, making a few hundred pipes a month, we're not having any of those issues really.
Is it the sourcing is only is it only Italy? And you mentioned Italy and Greece. So is it also because of the fact that I have an uncle and aunt and some cousins in Turkey. Is there any coming from Turkey as well? I wonder.
I don't know about Turkey as much,
but primarily it's Italy,
Italy,
Greece,
France as well. Anything that's right around that region.
I wonder if Spain gets any.
Yeah, Spanish briar as well. We've have relationships with Italy and Greece with a couple.
And they probably have the tradition
carvers.
of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're a little more connected in, I feel directly with the hand carving scene. So we've kind of built those relationships with these guys that we've been buying our handmade briar from, and then it's kind of turned into us buying our factory briar as well. And we try to keep the sources to a minimum. So
sure.
We just because the quality, we know what their quality is like. We know how to work with it. But we may over the next few years have to start developing other relationships with other briar mills because of the scarcity of other countries trying to build up the stock of briar. I could see China at some point starting to resell it. I could see them saying, hey, we've got a lot of this briar. We'll sell it to it at a more expensive price now because we basically have a warehouse full of briar that we don't need all of. But, we'll see what happens. That could change.
When did you start getting into cigars and selling cigars? Because, you've built a really nice reputation as a destination to go for cigar smokers too.
About 6 years ago when we opened the lounge here, that's when we really started, building our own humidor and our own cigar, collection to sell. We brought crown heads in very early on, right at the start, because obviously we already were big fans of crown heads. And, it just made sense too. It was we're Nashville connection, all that. And we also just happened to love the cigars. It worked out. It wasn't oh, well, let's carry them because they're in Nashville. Let's carry them because we love them.
Yeah.
And so that was a perfect connection for us. And then, I think, other brands that we started bringing in the beginning, Tatuaje was a big one for us because we had met Pete and Pete was into pipes and we kind of built a friendship with him. And then we kind of stuck with more boutique brands Crown Heads and Tat, and we did bring in some majors. Now we've got Padron and Fuente and some other brands like that. But a lot of what we have in there are more focused on boutique brands. But obviously over time, as you build customer base, people ask for things, and when you get enough people asking for a certain brand, you probably should carry it. Now we've got the Ozgener cigars as well, which is very exciting. Those are great. And we, got to know John, and that was, I think it was 5 years ago.
You read my mind. I was like, when did we first start talking about doing a shop exclusive? And I think it was 5 years ago.
I think it was in 2019.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because it doesn't feel that long ago, but then you had COVID, and everything is just everything's a blur since then. And everything just kind of flew by, and it was all these years just disappeared, it felt like.
Yeah, truly.
But I think it was 2019 that we first sat down.
Because I think you had mentioned you had a very specific size for 4 kicks, a 4x44, and I'm like, this is pretty turnkey. It should be easy.
Yeah.
And it just kept getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and other projects would get, or whatever. So I guess, when did we actually get that thing in motion? About a year ago. Something like that, I think.
No, that's all right.
I think it was about a year ago. It was definitely when Andy was on board, so it had to be within the last year.
Yeah. It was about last year sometime that we finally were like, let's actually get this thing going.
Yeah.
And you know, I think packaging wise, that was kind of one of the hurdles was like, do we box them?
Mm-hmm.
Do we do like a bundle thing? Ultimately, we decided to do the craft paper bundles.
Right.
And then the 20 count bundles. And the size, you know, I don't know anything about cigar manufacturing. So, you know, I come to you with a size that I think would be more simple. Turns out that's actually more difficult.
Yeah.
There's a lot more waste involved.
Correct.
I never knew that. And because I've never been a cigar roller, so I don't know how this works. And so I think that, you know, that was a hard thing to figure out. I was like, well, if we do them in bundles and not in boxes, we can keep the price, you know, a little bit more reasonable. Because they actually will be more expensive to make, believe it or not. So there were some challenges to figure out there, but ultimately, I mean, when you had, you know, Ernesto send the initial sample that he put together, it was great.
Yeah,
right from the start.
I love it. I'm smoking one now. I love that size. Like I'm a smaller ring gauge, smaller. I love petite Coronas.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the domestic market nowadays, the demand is like, you know, it's everybody wants the 50
Toros
and above. Today's Toro is now 54. You know, when I got into it, it was a 50. So everything's gotten bigger.
You know, and we knew that. We knew that when we did this project, it was going to be a little bit harder of a sell. Mm-hmm. Like these weren't going to just fly off the shelf. Like, but we did. When we thought about doing it, we thought, well, this will be a unique size for this cigar. I mean, 4 Kicks is a flagship cigar for you. And we thought if John would be open to doing a small 4 Kicks, that could be pretty cool. And a lot of those Crown Heads fans out there, I think, would really dig that. And so even though, you know, we're still selling through that initial run, they've been selling well. You know, I'm happy with how they've been moving. And everybody that's actually tried them has come back and said, I love this cigar.
Yeah,
this is a great size.
It smokes
and
really
so,
well.
You know, if we had done like a bigger ring gauge 4 Kicks, they probably would have disappeared within like, you know, the first week.
Yeah.
But I think for us, it was more about like, if we can sell half of them, you know, or more than half of them and make our money back or whatever off of them and then just have them, like it would be worth it. And like, so I think them moving slow off the shelves is fine with me. I don't mind it. I love having an exclusive and having like the 4 Kicks here in house, like the 444. It's
and I think really cool. People out there that are interested in trying it, they can order it online from you guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So we've got them on the website, briarworksusa.com. And we actually did because initially we just launched the bundles.
Right.
And, you know, a lot of people, they're going to look at that and say, that's 20 sticks. I don't know if I want to buy that many. But we didn't want to sell them as singles either. That just felt like it'd be annoying.
Right.
So what we actually did was we broke open the bundles and we actually got our own little bags that we could do a little 4-pack of them. And we actually can seal them with a little vacuum sealer, put a little sticker on them.
With a Boveda.
And, put a Boveda in there. So like we've actually been selling a lot more in that format because it's less of a commitment. People just have to buy 4 of them. It's easy for us, you know, we just package them up in that format. So yeah, those have been going well. And then it's great here in the store, you know, people love it. We built our own cigar clientele, I feel like here. A lot of people that were into cigars, you know, they know what they like, but we developed a unique clientele here in Colombia because we brought in a lot of people that never smoked cigars before. So we were able to sort of push them on like, hey, try this small ring gauge thing out. Try this, you know. So we actually sell a good amount of small ring gauge cigars here. We also sell a lot of 60 ring gauge too. But like, I think having that size has been fine for us because our locals love them here. They think it's great.
I want to ask you about Columbia, Tennessee, because you know, Columbia has been like a lot of people in Nashville. They talk more and more about Columbia, and you guys feels like when you guys moved here, you were like right on the leading edge of when people were talking about moving to Columbia. Yeah. Columbia now has this reputation of being kind of a haven for a lot of creative businesses and entities. So I'm just curious on your what you're seeing in Columbia. What kind of businesses have been moving here What's the kind of culture of Colombia like now, as opposed to when you first looked at moving over here?
Yeah. So when we first got into town, we're right downtown. I mean, we're 2 blocks from the courthouse, which is really cool. And
my son played a soccer game over here about a year ago.
Nice.
And I remember coming up, it was a later soccer game. You guys weren't open. It might have been on a Monday or something.
Yeah.
And so I remember we went to Puckett's afterwards too, because that was the place that was open that we could get some barbecue. But.
Yeah. So right downtown, that's when I think what happened was you've got Puckett's opened, but also right before that, you had a local coffee shop here called Muletown Coffee. Muletown, just real quick, is that's kind of like the official nickname of Colombia. And that's because back in the 1800s, you got all this agriculture around here, tobacco farming. So mules obviously were used, in the 1800s a lot for plowing the fields and just as laborers in the farms. And so what happened in the 1800s is they started doing this big breeders' day, and where they would auction mules for different farmers and stuff like that. And it developed over time into becoming this huge annual event where they ended up having the big mule day, a parade and all this stuff. They had competitions with the mules, and they had a pageant almost, where they would have the girls would do a beauty pageant and be the mule day queen, or whatever. And so it became this huge event that people from all over the country and even outside of the US would come in for. They'd have 100,000 people come into town for.
Wow.
And so Mule Day became this huge thing once a year. It's a week-long event. And so Muletown became the nickname of Colombia. So to go back to that, that's why Muletown Coffee opened up with that name. And great local coffee shop. That was the first business I ever came to down here. And I was like, man, this is a cool area. I could see some real development happening down here. We should try and get down here. So that's why we ended up here. And then you have a couple local breweries that opened up. One was here right before we opened. And then you've got now you've got all these local businesses that are unique. And one thing I love about downtown Columbia is they've kind of kept the chains out of downtown Columbia. It's more about locally owned businesses. The most chain type thing you're going to see is something like a Puckett's. That's now it's is a Nashville based local restaurant that became a chain.
They have multiple locations. Yeah.
But it's really still a small ish, chain.
Didn't American Pickers move here too?
Yeah. So Mike Wolf, who does American Pickers, the History Channel show, he lives in Leapers Fork, but he has a lot of real estate, and he actually has his own, he calls it Columbia Motor Alley, but he's got a building over there where he keeps a lot of his antiques and his old cars and stuff. And so Mike's helped develop this area a lot too, because he's actually bought a lot of real estate down here, and he's refurbed a lot of these old buildings and rented them out to other local businesses. And so he's been a big proponent in what's happened, because, they film down here, they do stuff with the show. So that's also drawn people in.
Yeah.
Another business I'd love to talk about too is Bradley Mountain. So Bradley Mountain, they came from San Diego about a year and a half ago. And Bradley Mountain is right over on the other side of downtown in the Arts District. And we met them about 5 years ago because a friend of mine that was another pipe maker out in California, he was getting these pipe rolls made. And they're wax canvas with a leather strap. And it's this little travel bag for your pipe stuff, right?
Very cool.
And so I actually reached out to them about 5 years ago to make some for Briarworks. And it just so happened, and this was complete coincidence, about a year and a half ago, they started looking at moving to Columbia. And Tyler, their owner, he didn't even realize that we were in Columbia. And so he's in town looking at buildings to move their business from San Diego out to Columbia, Tennessee through another mutual friend connection. And Matt, the owner of Muletown Coffee, is meets him. And he's like, oh, the guys over at Briarworks, we should go over and see them. Don't you make their pipe rolls? And Tyler was like, wait, Briarworks is in Columbia? He had no idea.
That's funny.
So that was a really cool, unique thing that happened. But they make these really cool, handcrafted, wax canvas backpacks and jackets and all this cool stuff. And so they've got a unique little kind of similar building with a little window. You can see their little factory shop, and then you've got like a little bar and like retail store up front. It's kind of like a smaller version of this, but like they're doing great business over there. They have a coffee shop too. So they're like, they got the morning crowd, they're hanging out there having coffee in the little like, room, the retail store and all that. So a lot of cool businesses in downtown.
And you said there's an arts district too. So is that like a lot of like artists that have moved down?
Yeah, they've got the Columbia Arts Building over there, and they've got a lot of like, you got artists, you got painters that are out of there, but you've also got like little local restaurants and stuff over in that building. We have a little like, how Franklin has like the factory. Mm-hmm. We've got a factory here in Columbia that's kind of taken off now, where you've got several like local like shops and businesses. I think what's cool about Columbia though is that it's kind of like Franklin, but it's years behind where Franklin is now, Tennessee, but like it's also like a little bit more localized. Mm-hmm. They're trying really hard to push the local thing and not let too many of the chains come into town. They really want it to be about the local side of things.
That's great.
We'll see over time, and that's probably going to change. But like at least for now, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great.
Well, I'm almost finished my second cigar, so I guess that's about the time. But
I've talked too much. I'm still
man.
Man.
It's been great.
Yeah.
Learned a lot, and I'm sure that the Visitors Bureau are going to give you a nice check in the mail for Columbia. So, but Pete, thanks for having us.
Thank you, Pete.
It's been really wonderful.
Awesome.
Such a good vibe. Be sure if you're even coming close to Nashville, come down to Columbia. It's only an hour drive. It's actually 45 minutes, I think it took us.
It wasn't bad at all.
Well worth it. It's just such a vibe down here. It's really great. So,
great.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
so
much.
Great.
So,
Congratulations with everything.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very exciting.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah,
and if anybody wants to, check out the 444, right?
Yep, BriarworksUSA.com.
Yep.
Get your 4-pack or even a bundle or whatever. It's fantastic.
Also, I want to say one more thing before we wrap up is that like you're also well known for doing like really cool events over here.
Yeah,
I mean, can you talk a little bit about some of the events that you do? Because they're really unique.
Say that's an annual. Our big. We do have our own cigar events that we do. Obviously, we got one coming up with Crown Heads, but we've got March. So every year in March, we do our own pipe show. It's called the Muletown Pipe Show.
Yeah, and
we actually have a website for it, muletownpipeshow.com, and that is a really cool, unique event. We clear out our factory floor, and we allow 30 or so vendors to come in, other pipe makers, hand carvers, maybe people with old like estate pipe collections.
Yeah, like I want to come and bring some CAOs, old
absolutely.
CAOs.
That'd be awesome. And so that's developed into, I think we've done this next year is going to be our 5th one. It's like March 14th, 15th, 16th, that weekend. We'll have, and it's so cool. Like we got people from all over the country coming to this thing. This past year we had like 600 people come out for it.
Wow.
And it's just fun. You've got like during the day, you've got your pipe show back there. People are buying stuff. And then at night, we're out here in the lounge, all hanging out, having drinks and smoking. And like, so it's like $10 when we put our tickets on sale soon. It's like a $10 advance ticket. And like, you get that back because we give people like a little $10 voucher to use it like our merch booth, and they can buy get like a coffee mug or shirts or whatever. So it's definitely worth coming to. If that's like a time that it's convenient to make a trip out here, I would say March that weekend. It'd be a cool weekend to do it for sure. So.
Awesome.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having us. I guess until the next one, keep smoking Crown Heads, keep smoking Oz Family Cigars. Check out BriarworksUSA.com, Columbia, Tennessee, all those good things, and we'll see you on the next one.
See ya.